Sorry, I was checking if there was anything in my teeth.
Hi, Eric.
Hey,
Here we are together. I do find this format, I love being with you in person, but I find it a little bit challenging because I always forget to look at the camera because I automatically look at the person. You know what I mean? Like I
no,
don't
I
know
think
if
that, yeah, it's natural.
you get a lot of my side view.
Sure.
I just want to say for context, before we start our episode today, that Eric and I are in both a movie coma, him more than me, and a food coma.
I'm not in a movie coma. I'm actually now in a movie deficit. I want more movies.
We're in a movie.
Well, I've watched so many good films now, this past week specifically. It makes me really just, every time you see something that's good and makes you like inspired, just makes you want to get up and do something or watch something else or, go to the next thing. I think it's really awesome when a movie can do that.
So that was our weekend. But now today this is episode 37.
Yeah.
Episode 37 of the Mom and Eric podcast. Welcome.
What's up?
Yeah. So today,
I'm ready. I'm ready.
yeah, exactly. Perfect. For promotion. I'm ready for
10 out of 10.
So today we're talking about, if you haven't guessed already, we're talking about it was actually Eric's suggestion, I think a friend's suggestion.
Carrie suggestions, so shout out Carrie.
Yeah, so we are going to talk about the SpongeBob movie. Is that what
Yeah.
it's called? SpongeBob?
The Sponge because
The
in all
SpongeBob SquarePants
in all
movie.
seriousness, it's the SpongeBob movie.
The
There might
SpongeBob
be
movie.
other iterations, but that's the SpongeBob movie. And everybody knows what you're talking about
Yes, it
when you
is
say
the
these.
SpongeBob movie, and it is the 2004 one because there have been two made since then, and a whole bunch of specials. But Eric suggested this. I had not seen it, I don't think, since you were little, little, little. So 2004 is a long time ago. So we're here to talk about SpongeBob, the movie. But I think before we talk about SpongeBob, the SpongeBob movie, I think we have to talk about SpongeBob.
It's a really influential show, especially for me.
Yes.
But
Yes.
yeah, I mean, because I grew up with that.
Yeah.
And that's a whole different, I think, love I have for that show.
Yeah.
That ties into this movie because if I think a lot of movies that are based on shows can definitely, or based on, any other existing medium or story, can definitely deviate from its original source material. But this feels like the extension um of that source material. So
Yes.
yeah.
So I should say that as a parent, SpongeBob, I realized when and Annie were little and they were watching SpongeBob. So SpongeBob is a cartoon. It ran on Nickelodeon. Is it still running, by the way?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, I
It's
think
still
it
running.
is. I think it has some type of
I heard it
record.
was season 27 or something.
Oh my God, it's
Yeah.
great. It's the longest. I think that it has a record as the longest running animated series ever. But it got super popular on Nickelodeon, and so when you and Annie were younger, it was on a lot. And Eric also, when from a very young age, would often repeat phrases that were mystifying to us. Um, and then we later realized that it came from SpongeBob. So I will just say what was interesting to me back then and what is still interesting to me now is that SpongeBob, it's not like I spent all my time watching the cartoons with the kids, you know? And there are so many parents that I can imagine so many parents when having SpongeBob on from outside, if you're not watching the show, but you're just hearing the show, it probably sounds like one of the most annoying shows ever.
Yeah.
Ever. And it in terms of its like annoying external sound quality, it's almost like, you have a clown or a magician show up at your kid's birthday party, and all the magician or the clown says is, "Hey kids, let's scream." And all the kids are like, "Ah!" And you're like, oh my God, this is a nightmare, you know? And so it wasn't, so I really, for a few years, thought that SpongeBob was the most annoying kids show ever. And I thought that it was the equivalent of Barney, which I actually thought was hell. I thought Barney was hell. I thought Barney was the dumbest, drabbest show I've ever seen. So then I don't know what it was that actually made me sit down and watch a SpongeBob episode. But once I watched an episode, I actually started to get kind of into it. And that's because the show itself it's kind of insanely good. It's set in a world called Bikini Bottom. It's under the sea. It's populated by characters that are both fish-like and not fish-like. But the titular character, as I say, the main character is not a form of marine life. He is a sponge. He is a sentient sponge. And so even describing this, it sounds insane. And his best friend is a starfish. So anyway, so a little bit of backstory on this show. It was created by this guy named Steven Hillenberg, who I did some research on in preparation for this episode, and I was so utterly fascinated by him and how his background comes through in this TV show for SpongeBob. And so Steven Hillenberg he was passionate about marine biology, and that's what he majored in was marine biology.
Mm.
So he's a huge fan of the ocean, which is so funny because that both explains Bikini Bottom, this fictional world, but it also doesn't because nothing about Bikini Bottom obeys the rules of the
Wow.
ocean.
I didn't know that. That's a really interesting fact. I think that, I mean, that definitely shows he, knew like kind of the real science, but
Yes,
just like decided to, make it like a fun world, imaginative world for himself.
yes. Yeah. I mean, this is what I mean about nothing obeys the rules of reality in Bikini Bottom, which is that toilets flush, people can squirt water at each other.
Yeah.
There's fire, there's fire, there's ice, like none, and yet there are some nods to reality. So, for example, there is a squirrel character who has to live in a hermetically sealed world underneath the ocean because she can't obviously breathe underwater. So there are like all these bizarre rules, which I find hilarious. But anyway, I'll just say that the more episodes I watch of SpongeBob, the more I really appreciated not just the stories, it's incredibly insanely funny and humorous. And the humor is actually just so it's both goofy and high level. It's both like so silly and also high level. And so it actually the humor of SpongeBob would qualify as some of the greatest comedy of all times because the jokes are so funny.
Yeah.
I'll stop there. And do you want to talk a little bit about the show before we get to the movie itself?
The thing,
Oh, well, wait. I want to say one more thing about
yeah.
Steven Hillenberg. He was a marine biology major in college, and then he went to the California Institute of Arts and learned
Mm,
animation.
yeah.
So when I found that out, I was sort of thinking, oh my God, this man combined his two passions, animation and
Yeah.
marine life,
And then
and he
made one
made
of the
SpongeBob.
greatest shows of all time.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's like that's insane.
Yeah.
Okay? That's like saying like one of my passions, which is like let's just say British children's books, or whatever, and cooking. Then I somehow made like I wrote a children's book about British cooking. Like that's it just doesn't life doesn't work to me. Like I feel like life is about like you just
I didn't know
make
one of
stuff.
your passions was I guess British literature.
Oh, I have many passions.
Okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, British literature is totally one of my passions.
Got it.
That's
I
why I
didn't know
love.
that's what, like when thinking of the first things to come to mind for me to create, I just didn't
Are you
expect that.
serious?
No,
That
no.
is like defining.
You should write that.
That's a core defining
Yeah.
quality. All right. So that's what I would say about Stephen Hillenburg and the show. And I can talk a little bit more about it before we get to the movie. But anyway, say what you will
Well,
about
I
it.
just, SpongeBob
It's
is
formative for
yeah,
you.
it's formative not only in a way that like, kids who watched it had this sense of like what, true art is, in my opinion. Um, but just the same as as somebody who didn't grow up with it and was banned from watching it because this is probably the most common show I've heard that kids were not allowed to watch. I
Really?
mean, yeah. So I mean, a lot of people I'll just encounter,
Were they not allowed to watch it because it was annoying?
they were not allowed to watch it because their parents hated SpongeBob, either hated SpongeBob and didn't want them to watch it, or they literally thought that SpongeBob made their kids like more stupid.
Oh, that's
There was
wild.
there was apparently, I remember learning about this years ago, but there was apparently an article that came out like at the time about SpongeBob and how it rots your kid's brain. Yeah. And I think
That is terrible.
that was just, not only was that something that spread around, but like also from what you talked about, how like sometimes the humor can just devolve into like shouting, yelling, like and screaming and like silly noises. And like
Yeah, but
for
it's like not so
for
much
the
more than
one
that.
parent that happens to catch it on like a bad day when they're already having a shit time with their kid,
Yeah.
like, that's the last straw. And and actually I was rewatching episodes and I was watching it and going like, okay, I could see why a parent would hate like having this on all the time.
Yes, it's that ambient noise. It's terrible
Yeah.
ambient noise,
Yeah.
but it's great storytelling.
Yeah.
It's great storytelling.
But
Uh,
like again, it's honestly something that's a bit of a defining feature about a person when meeting them. Like, some and it's
Yes.
a little bit of a tell and a little bit of a joke that like, when you meet somebody new and you want to be friends, like you say like, have you seen SpongeBob? And if they haven't seen it, then they will not understand it, Like or getting them to get into it is a whole different thing because if you just watch a one-off episode from some random season, then that dictates your whole, perception of it for these people who their parents like said, no, this is trash. Like you can't watch that.
God, SpongeBob is not trash.
No.
Okay, so I have to talk a little bit before we talk about the movie plot. But SpongeBob, the reason why I think it's so special, and it's so sad that I can see how parents would be annoyed by it as ambient noise, but the character of SpongeBob himself, I think he's a boy, is
Yes. He's
is so he's such a heart of gold, pure-hearted. He's so pure-hearted. He is the most pure-hearted character ever. So SpongeBob is really you don't know his biological age because he's a sponge, but he comes off as a little kid, you know? And everything he embodies the best of being a little kid. He's full of wide-eyed wonder. He's full of imagination. And the thing that I love the most about him, and what I really, really enjoyed watching, why I enjoyed rewatching the movie last week, is that he's so optimistic and he's so resilient. Optimism and resilience are his two major qualities. So in all the episodes, has setbacks, he has trials and tribulations, but everything he just has this amazing, optimistic, sunny, resilient spirit, and he bounces back, literally bounces back from every obstacle or failure that comes his way. And I think that is the loveliest message
yeah.
for kids. Like I think that for kids to watch this, they can watch SpongeBob be bizarrely good at some things and also be really terrible at some things. But throughout all of it, and this is really true in the movie too, he's just so optimistic and he's so resilient and it's lovely. Like it's just the loveliest thing.
Yeah.
Stuff like that feels so clever to me and it feels so also unbelievably it's a great message. So I do get the noise part, but man, I would show this to little kids to just show them that the world isn't terrifying,
Yeah.
you know? Or the world can feel terrifying, but that you can get through it with the sort of right attitude and spirit. I think that that's the loveliest message of all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's something that, is really great for kids. But it's great for kids because of its inherent quality that it's a well done show. It's like
Yeah.
a well executed show, written well. Jokes are great. Like kids will understand the most obvious jokes, but
Yeah.
even parents will get the subtlest like, hints that are like a kind of adult jokes.
Right. And
And
the op
that's what carries people. That's my favorite type of media, like of all time, is media that carries through somebody's life. You can enjoy it as a kid, you can enjoy it as an adult. It's for everybody. You want to compare it to, kids content coming out now, or just kids content in general, where
apparently Bluey is a big thing.
I've heard of that, but I
Bluey and
just
then
don't know what that
Bluey and
is.
Peppa the Pig. Those are the two big
Yeah,
ones.
and admittedly, I obviously don't watch kid shows now.
Yeah.
It is something that seems to be it has to be built in with a certain generation, and that has to spread, on its own.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I haven't seen that with Peppa Pig and
Yeah. The
Bluey.
the other thing about SpongeBob's character, which is especially relevant for the movie, is that all the other characters in Bikini Bottom are such interesting foils for SpongeBob. So Squidward is such a curmudgeon and is so grouchy and is so sour and curdled about the world.
Hmm.
So his funny plot points are when he manages to not be like that, or he has like a tiny glimmer. And then you have Mr. Krabs, which is who is the most like capitalist
Capitalist,
similar,
oppressive,
like
like
all he cares,
boss.
yes, all he cares about is he wants money, he
Yeah.
wants money, he wants money. He means well, but he's just so greedy and he's so driven by greed. And just the other funny thing is he's played by he's voice acted by Clancy Brown, which I didn't know, who played that terrible prison guard in Shawshank Redemption.
Dude,
So
that oh my God, that is him. I knew that
I
also.
I did not
He
know
was
that
in
until I looked.
he was in a popular video game, Detroit Become Human.
Oh,
But he was a very like serious character. So
yeah,
it's so funny to remember that
he can do
he can
that.
really comedic voice.
Yeah, and then you have his best friend Patrick, who's an idiot, but very, very sweet. He's a starfish. But anyway, all right. So let's talk about the movie, which was intended as a series finale. It was intended as sort of the wrap up for all this, the show itself, but the show just kept on going, and there were more movies made because money. That's Mr. Krabs. The SpongeBob movie is very simple. SpongeBob thinks that he's going to get promoted. So that's the subplot is that he thinks he's going to get promoted, but he does not get promoted by Mr. Krabs when he opens up a second crab shack. Is that it?
The Krusty Krab.
The Krusty Krab.
The second Krusty Krab, which is just the funniest joke, one of the funniest
Yes,
jokes
it's
in
right
the
next
movie.
door.
The Krusty Krab too. It's just like, especially now, right now, like in our era right now of like sequels being made constantly or like IP being revived, like it just that's exactly people use that as a meme,
Yeah.
like to compare to what's happening now with
Yes.
those
Yes.
franchises and
Yeah.
things. So
So Mr.
it's
Krab,
so
yeah,
good.
Mr. SpongeBob works as a line cook, a fry cook at the Krusty
Oh my
Krab.
God, okay, we don't need
Because
to
yeah,
go.
yeah, but I just want to explain this. The restaurant that's owned by Mr. Krabs, he opens up a second one. SpongeBob thinks he's going to be the manager. He doesn't get the promotion. And then there's the main plot is, and then but this is central to the plot. Mr. Krabs says that he did not get the promotion because he comes off like a kid. And he's
No,
not,
because he is a kid,
he
and
is a
he
kid.
says you are a kid.
You are a kid. You're
Yeah,
not a man. So
just a kid.
yeah, he gives Squidward the promotion instead.
Yeah,
So the curdled guy. Anyway, so then the main plot is that somehow King Neptune's crown gets stolen by Plankton, who's always trying to steal the recipe for the Krabby Patty. And so King Neptune blames Mr. Krabs for his crown theft, and then SpongeBob and Patrick embark on this whole quest to recover his crown.
yeah. I just say it's also a funny joke. There's
There's so many funny
just
jokes.
in recalling anything about the movie, there's just gonna be a joke that comes up, and you'll remember is so funny, and that's just throughout the entire movie. Like even when it gets arguably really emotional, there's one funny thing that happens right after, or right before it.
Yes. It's
But
not, is it a running gag or is it just a
no, it's not
running?
a run. It's just a joke.
It's just
It's
yeah,
just a
just a
joke
million
for the
jokes.
scene.
Yeah, yeah,
So I mean, rarely is it something that actually calls back to anything. It's just
yeah,
the show being funny or the movie being funny. But for Plankton coming up with his plan, he says, "Oh, because you're coming up with a plot for existing characters
yeah,
that do the same thing basically over and over in each
yeah,
episode. So you have to make something that's momentous enough for an entire movie, like in a theater experience, which
yes.
is what the movie was meant to be. I just thought it was so funny that they made Plankton, all he had to say was like, "Well, I've done all of plans A through Y." And then Karen's like, "What about plan Z?" And he's like, "Plan Z? What are you talking about?" And then he looks in his filing cabinet and sees plan Z, and it's like, "It's perfect." And then he does that.
Yes, that's the
So
plan to
that's
get the
another funny
yes.
joke.
So that's the plot of the movie.
Well, Neptune shows up
Yeah, I said that.
because his oh, you did?
He shows up and he gives SpongeBob and Patrick 5 days to recover his crown
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
from Shell City, which is
6 days
apparently this
actually.
6 days, which is this destination this place that's guarded by the one-eyed Cyclops or the one-eyed Cyclops, and nobody's ever returned from Shell City. So Patrick and SpongeBob decide, and they're helped, by the way, by Princess, what's her name?
Mindy.
Mindy.
You know how I knew I loved this movie? And this is also kind of what inspired us talking about it is we were at dinner and Carrie said, I just asked the question, what's the name of the princess in the SpongeBob movie? And it took me 5 seconds, but then I was like Mindy, and I hadn't rewatched it at that point. I just remembered, and
Yeah.
that's yeah, and she's played by
Scarlett
Scarlett
Johansson,
Johansson,
which is
who
very funny.
once knowing that, she it makes it all that much better. Like,
Yes.
her voice is really great. She
Yeah.
should also do more voice work.
Yeah. So I think that the movie is actually a really successful movie. Like I don't think that movies often based on TV series are that successful. It was a great movie version of a much beloved series because the characters were all given a lot to do. Like everybody had a part to play. Everybody was very true to themselves. Like there was no like weird departure from their characters. And then the other thing is that the plot was just interesting enough to sustain a movie rather than just be a standalone episode. So most of the episodes are based on sort of one concept or idea. Like one of the concepts is SpongeBob doesn't know how to drive. So he goes to driving school and he fails miserably. Another one is that SpongeBob and Squidward are taking art classes together and Squidward is desperate to become a great artist. And it turns out that SpongeBob is like insanely talented and does not know how talented he is. That is a hilarious episode. So all of them are sort of based
Amadeus.
around about what?
Amadeus.
Yes, around one concept. But the movie is actually based on this quest. And the quest is that SpongeBob and Patrick go on this very, very dangerous quest. And occasionally what carries them through is their optimism and and SpongeBob's optimism and resilience. And so the funniest sequence in my mind in that movie is when they're traveling through this incredibly dangerous Gulf before Shell City. And it's like this long road in the middle of nowhere. There's this abrupt boundary between Bikini Bottom and this desolate space. And there's giant sea monsters under there, but they're imbued with so much confidence during this because Princess Mindy convinced them that they were men by pasting seaweed onto them and giving them mustaches. So these mustaches are like the magic feather in Dumbo. They just give them so much confidence, and then I think they sing that song "Now That We're Men" that entire sequence.
They
Correct?
do. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's my favorite sequence. So I think it was a really, really successful movie. I have many like favorite little bits that I want to relay, but I didn't want to know if you wanted to talk about how you thought about the movie. I can picture you helpless with laughter at certain points.
Yeah, yeah, it's so funny. And, it's always I think I've only rewatched it, like a handful of times. Despite that, it's like something that's so pure, like that stays in my heart, like
Yeah.
forever. Like I'm talking about how much the show means to me and how like I've grown up with it, and it's always been like a really great show with my friends, like specifically because except for Lucas, because Lucas hates it. Um but we always love rewatching it. And I only grew more admiration for the movie in terms of its filmmaking. Because
I think the filmmaking is great.
yeah, because when you think about it, it's a very difficult project, but only if, you're trying to meet like the passion that they had for the series and for SpongeBob as a character. Like,
Yes.
and for I mean specifically Steven Hillenburg, I would assume he headed up that sort of love for him.
Yes.
And
Can I
they
do a special shout out in terms of movie making for the sound design?
yeah,
I think the sound design of SpongeBob and the SpongeBob movie was great.
yeah.
Really, and I never thought about this, but I mean, we talk about sound a lot on this podcast, and we were talking about it today. I was talking we saw the Iron Giant this afternoon and it was so unbelievable. And I was talking about how beautiful the score was, but I also thought the sound design was incredible because you heard all the creaks when the giant moved, and then you also heard like the blinking of his eyes, the metallic sounds that they reproduced and the hollowness of it to indicate how colossal he was were huge. And
Yeah.
by the same token, I was so struck by the sound design when I was watching the SpongeBob movie, and it made me realize that I had always overlooked that. But Squidward has the most iconic, like every single time that Squidward walks, he makes it like that. It's the funniest. It's a comedic approximation of what a squid would sound like if his tentacles were
Yeah.
slapping dry land.
Yeah.
That's what's so funny about it. Like there's no reality equivalent of a squid actually walking on dry land. So they made up in the sound design what it would sound like
Yeah.
if his tentacles slapped. And the other day I was walking Jack with Dad, and I was wearing new sneakers. And I walked out and they were squeaking. And I said, "Oh my God, I sound like Squidward." And Dad starts laughing because he knew immediately what I meant.
Yeah.
But the movie carried through that. It carried, like, I noticed things like buckets clanging, like buckets clanging, and the sound of, like, just doors slamming and all the bubbles that happen, and all the monsters moving around. Oh, the other thing that the sound design was incredible was when they were in Goober's ice cream parlor,
Yeah.
Gooby's ice cream parlor, and they were eating, and you could actually, you know what I mean? Like all the sounds of them shoveling in ice cream were great. So I really have to like call out the sound design.
Something on my rewatch that I was thinking as a whole umbrella, point was just how does somebody think of all this? Like
Yes.
who comes up with that?
This guy who
Um,
majored in marine
yeah,
biology and there's an
I'm
animation school.
I'm so glad you said that because that makes so much sense. Like why can't, your separate passions in something that's not, filmmaking
Yeah.
related, like why can't they be involved in your art and in your creations? Um, and this smallest thing that connects to what you were talking about sound, that contributes to that is just when any character moves a limb in this air, in the space, this air, then you hear a water sound and
Yes.
you see little bubbles
Yes.
animated.
It's
That is
incredible.
that is such a tiny little detail,
Yeah.
but they include it because obviously these characters are underwater. They need to sound like they're underwater.
Yeah.
And that it's such an easy thing to be overlooked, but it's because they believe in the world and they believe in the characters.
Yes.
Um,
Okay. So
and
this,
that's something that it's not even it's even more incredible that it was something that extended from the show and not
yes.
that wasn't just created for the movie.
Yeah. What's okay, so what's crazy to me, have been trying to write fiction lately, and I've been trying to put in fantasy magical elements. And I think that one of the hardest tasks that I'm coming up against, which is true of all my favorite fantasy novels, is how much reality do you put in there? Like how much of the known world do you put in there versus how much
Can you
fantasy
embellish?
and how much imagination do you put in there?
Hmm.
And so to me, SpongeBob and the movie have such a perfect blend of fantasy and realism. And so, and I know I'm saying realism when it's like Bikini Bottom and
Yeah.
all this, but like, Squidward plays the clarinet. Like a clarinet is a part of the known world, the world that we know, and and Sandy is a squirrel, that cannot breathe underwater, so she always has to wear a helmet. So there's all these nods to the known world. But then because Bikini Bottom mixes all these elements of our known world and then this fantasy, like straight from imagination, then it makes it especially funny when they actually do enter our world.
Yeah.
So Shell City turns out to be this janky souvenir shop where a deep sea diver, collects all these sea specimens and dries them under a heat lamp and then puts them in these awfully tacky souvenir installations,
There's a very subtle message about environmentalism
Yes.
in that scene, because the
I
animals
don't think it's
come.
that subtle.
I guess it's not subtle at all. But I mean, they came up with such a silly way that he torments like animals.
Yes.
Like, obviously in a more real movie, it would be horrible things. But
Yes.
like, he just wants to put googly eyes and make them like knickknacks. That's such a funny scene because the mariachi band comes in
Yes,
too.
yes, yes. Not only is Bikini Bottom, the world of Bikini Bottom, this fantastic mix of the known world versus, pure like invention, which is amazingly creative when you think about it. But the other thing but then when they actually encounter our world, it gets even funnier. And as you know, his favorite episode is when they all go up and suddenly like when they go above the water line, they're just like a little sponge on a stick and a little starfish on a stick, which I agree is hilarious.
Yeah.
I actually have the hugest respect for Hillenberg's genius. I was so sad to hear that he died early and that he died of ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, because that is a really, really horrible disease. It's basically where you lose your motor function. But I feel so grateful to him. If I could tell him, I feel so grateful to him for I just love it when people pursue their passions and then they somehow manage to create something like SpongeBob. And I know I'm talking about it like it's high art. You and I have
because it
had
is.
but you and I have had this conversation a lot. Like I read a lot of theory that the distinctions between high art and low art are, or mass art, are actually meaningless. But I think that SpongeBob is just so pure and true, and I just think it's wonderful. So I loved rewatching the movie. I was truly helpless at the part where they thought that they were men because of their seaweed mustaches. um, and yeah, I just thought it was great.
Something that had to be elevated, on top of like the sound design. Obviously, they had to, step up like for this one experience that they were doing in the theater, was the music, and something Dad commented on today
Yeah.
was how good the music is in SpongeBob. Like
Yes.
they use in the show they use a lot of like Hawaiian, kind of music
Yeah.
or music or even like, jazz, just like random things that just kind of are curated for this kind of vibe of Bikini Bottom.
Yes.
It's like I guess you could say it's like a beach town kind of vibe, but then when things get crazy, they can like make their own unique songs and
Yeah.
things. And that is taken to the highest level, like in this movie. The things that like Goofy Goober, like fucking Now That We're Men, all this stuff like that didn't exist before in the show. They created it for the movie. And it's unique to the movie. And that's like really important, when you're
I love
separating the
their
two.
original songs. Actually, I was obsessed with the Christmas song for the longest time.
Yeah.
I
And
love the Christmas song so much.
yeah, it's funny because you don't recall SpongeBob as like a musical show,
No.
It's just the music is usually just a gag. But in this movie, it's a gag, but it's also of paramount narrative importance,
Yes, it is. It is.
It's like integral to the story, which is, about like how even kids can save the world basically,
Yes,
or
that's
even
what it's about.
yeah, and kids are just because you're a kid doesn't mean you can't believe in yourself and do what you want to do. um
There's something a little Frodo-esque about SpongeBob taking
yeah,
on this mission.
yeah,
There's something a little bit like I will go to Mordor and I will
yeah.
I will retrieve the ring. And then the other funny, there are so many. I did not notice this the first time around I watched it or when watching the episodes, but there are so many homages to really famous things. I think that crazy guy that Dennis,
Yeah,
who sent Dennis? Was it Neptune or
Plankton.
Plankton? I think that Dennis is just like that crazy guy in Raising Arizona,
Hmm.
that um, the really crazy one that was the scene of the sort of final battle. But I think that did SpongeBob come first or did Raising Arizona come first? One of them
Raising
is
Arizona probably came first.
one of them is an homage to the other.
Yeah.
So, and then um, the other thing I wanted to note, just in terms of gags, oh, there are so many sight gags. There are like just so many like ridiculous, like funny sight gags. So I put this down to sort of SpongeBob lore, but I never really knew how SpongeBob put on his clothes. And in the movie, just they show that he keeps a whole stack of them, like flat cardboard flats, and that he
They
folds
fold
them
them
like
up.
a cardboard box. And I thought that was the funniest thing I'd ever seen. I was
Yeah.
laughing so hard.
Another sight gag that they do that they also do in the show all the time is
Yeah.
like the characters will be doing something, some action, and it'll be animated kind of like simply. But then if they stop, like they have an insert like shot of like whatever they're doing, So
Yeah.
like when SpongeBob brushes his teeth, he gets out a toothbrush
Yeah.
and then he holds it, and then it just cuts to this very like what looks to be painted shot of
Yeah.
like his arm holding
Yeah.
the toothbrush, and the toothbrush has like two
Oh yeah,
this
yeah.
two thistles for his two like teeth,
Right.
but then he brushes his eyes.
Eyes, yeah.
So it's cutting in on like just the completely still painted photo of his
Yeah.
hand that like enhances that joke.
Yes.
And that's used all the time in the show because when they cut in to something like and like make it really detailed for no reason, like
Yeah.
it just gives that world more depth
Yeah.
and more comedy.
The other thing I wanted to say was incredibly funny was that this is one this because this was a movie and not an episode. I said there was more scope for the characters to feel and do and to be sort
Yeah.
of important to the plot. So they gave a decent amount of time. They were cutting back and forth to what was happening between Neptune and Plankton and there's a lot of back and forth edit, and I actually thought that was a very well edited film.
Yeah.
And so but one in the editing in those sequences where they were showing Plankton implementing his evil plan, they really animated the heck out of SpongeBob's depression at not getting promoted the promotion.
Yeah.
So SpongeBob
Yeah.
not depressed SpongeBob was drawn so like he was falling apart.
Like he
And
was rock bottom, like just like drunk, hungover,
yes,
like from the
he
night before.
yeah, he was so hungover and his eyes were
Yeah, which
bloodshot.
is another piece about like adult jokes in a kid show. Like
Yes,
everybody knows like that trope,
yes,
like with like a character who's hit rock
yeah,
bottom, but he took it to like the next. It was like red eyes, like his eyes were purple. He had like stubble, like
yes.
where he didn't
He
have it
was so,
before,
he was
you
so
know. And
disgusting.
he had like this like crumpled hat like on
Yes,
him that just made him look
yeah.
disgusting.
And you know what's so funny about that? This is like layers
Treating the
of
wait staff like trash.
yes, and this is layers and layers of humor.
Yeah.
But the reason why it's layers and layers of humor is because actual sponges, when
Oh yeah.
they get really moldy and
Yeah.
gross. So that's what's so funny about this psychic is that SpongeBob, a sentient sponge-like creature, right? Well, actually, there are sponges. That's so interesting.
But he's specifically a cleaning sponge. Which I think is just it's a, like a play on how there are like sponges like there are sponges that are actually exist, but he's not that. He's like he's a cleaning sponge. Like because anytime they cut to like when he's like above water,
Uh,
he's like he just turns into like a normal looking
cleaning
like dish
sponge.
sponge.
I know. Okay, so let's again return to the character of Steven Hillenburg, who, out of his love for marine biology, he clearly knows what a real sponge looks like, and then he goes into animation, and then he decides to create this animated kids show about this fictional Bikini Bottom. He, in his mind, somehow says, instead of making it a real sponge, let's make it a household sponge. Let's make him resemble like a dishwashing
Yeah,
sponge, you know?
yeah,
And then when SpongeBob gets depressed, he starts looking like a moldy sponge, which is just cracking me up because sponges are so disgusting when they get old.
yeah.
And so I could go on and on. Okay, so I think that SpongeBob is one of those things that you have to put yourself inside. Like when you if you were I don't know if you would you do you think anyone would enjoy the movie though if they haven't seen the show?
I think it's funny enough that somebody would enjoy it. Yeah,
I'm not so sure.
I think so. I mean, once you understand what's happening.
I feel like you have to get invested in the character somehow.
Yeah, and that's what, my piece about like people who haven't seen it and start watching and
Yeah,
don't really understand. Obviously, but I just think the movie's a good enough whole experience. Like, I mean, fucking David Hasselhoff shows
I
up. Like,
know.
and some of us who are my age only know him from that, you know?
I know.
So, I mean, anybody in any age range,
The
I think
actual David Hasselhoff
would
has a
appreciate that.
great cameo in
Yeah.
there. Yes, he has a
Um,
great cameo.
I
So,
mean, and another thing too, with the piece about music, like obviously they created a whole, score for this movie, which is way different from the show on top of the music that is already kind of
yes.
coming from the show. But something that really impacted me like on this rewatch was that like when the movie ends and SpongeBob celebrates like after being promoted, it plays Ocean Man by Ween.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that for some reason even thinking about that makes me so emotional. And I think because it saves it you don't recognize a single song, that's not from the movie. And until that, like that's supposed to be like a recognizable song. Obviously, I only know that song from that movie, and that's why I think so many people my age probably love that song. And it makes us think of SpongeBob, but it's because it like ended that movie in such a positive, like optimistic, like light and that song is just so good.
Yeah,
And everybody knows the lyrics too.
yeah.
And it feels really hopeful. And so now I think anybody, who hears that song and thinks of that movie just feels like positivity and like laughing and a lot of really good feelings.
Yes.
That just come from that one song, and
Yeah.
they saved it, which is
It's
good.
it's funny because the litmus test that you talked about for SpongeBob,
Yeah.
I actually think applies to a lot. There's a similar parallel for people who just say that they don't like cartoons or they won't watch
Right,
animation.
yeah.
There are so many people who would judge judge an adult for watching SpongeBob. There's so many people who are like, why would you be watching a kids show? And there are also so many people who don't think that there are cartoons are suitable for adults unless they're actually meant explicitly for adults, like Adult Swim, you know. And
Yeah,
so,
yeah,
so that makes me sad because I think that cartoons like SpongeBob, and I also think that animated films um, like Iron Giant, which we saw today, and Eric and I are huge fans of all the Chuck Jones era of animation with Looney Tunes, and then also he did the Rudyard Kipling novels, the stories of the White Seal and Ricky Tikki Tavi, and so I think that we fervently believe that the that animation is not only its own art form, very worthy of admiration and attention at all from all ages, but it strikes me as insanely difficult to create something that is both appealing to kids and also appealing to adults. And that's actually where a lot of kids movies fail, where they are actually meant for kids, but they're torture for adults to watch.
yeah,
Um, the most striking examples of that being Alvin and the Chipmunks. And also whatever that guinea pig strike force movie.
G-Force,
G-Force. Hate that
classic.
movie. Yes,
I haven't seen
hate
that
it.
in a while though.
Yes. But I think that if a kid's movie, if a movie works, animated or not, but especially animation, because animation is so beautiful when it's done right.
Yeah,
Like if you talk about a movie like, you know, we did this in our when we actually talked about the Iron Giant in a previous episode, but all those movies that we talked about, and then when we did an episode on Flow, they're gorgeous to look at. They're gorgeous. I don't think SpongeBob is gorgeous to look at, but it's so bright and visually clever and it's hilarious. Like the animation style of SpongeBob is so suited to its brand of comedy. The other thing that I think is hilarious about the animation of SpongeBob and also the world in which it inhabits is that it really makes me suspend my understanding of space, like spatial relations. So, for example, I notice that sometimes I think that Squidward's house is always next door to SpongeBob's
hmm,
pineapple, but sometimes they seem further apart. Sometimes the Krusty Krab seems like it's a really long commute,
yeah,
and sometimes it seems like it's right around the corner, you know, and then sometimes like Plankton's evil stuff, like the chum bucket,
yeah,
would be really far away, and then sometimes it'd be like within sight of the
yeah.
Krusty Krab. So,
That's like a kind of Looney Tunes, Chuck Jones kind
yes,
of like sense of space and like our our context, like our
yes.
physical context
Yeah.
in the world.
The through line, by the way, between Chuck Jones and Brad Bird of the Iron Giant, who said that he was inspired by Chuck Jones's animation, and then SpongeBob, is that there's so much humor and emotion when people blink their eyes. And all three of those properties that I just described,
Yeah,
they all do I blink emotion,
yeah,
you know? So I first noticed this. I could always pick out a Chuck Jones's cartoon in all the Looney Tunes directors. I could always pick out a Chuck Jones one and a Tom and Jerry one based on the blinking of the eyes. And then that was totally the case with Iron Giant, you know, because eye blink was a huge deal with the robot. And it is such a big deal with SpongeBob because these creatures are also weird, like some of them look like fishes, and Mr. Krabs is a crab, and Sponge is a sponge. But a lot of the character acting in animation comes from their eyes. It really does. So like sometimes you have those big, you know, big bulbous eyes, you know, that are like showing shock and surprise. And then sometimes you have them like SpongeBob when he was depressed, and then he made them all like
hmm.
bloodshot and
There's
hungover.
this reason that SpongeBob has such a deep and rich meme culture
Yes.
online
Yeah.
because he's been in he has created so many memes.
Yeah.
There's so many lines that everybody recognizes. There are people who
The most common one that I've seen is 3 hours later. 3 hours
yeah,
later.
there are people who have never seen SpongeBob ever but know lines and know
Yes.
scenes because they went viral or they went viral as a trend on TikTok. Like there's a trend of SpongeBob like he's like in a cafe or something and he's
Yeah.
depressed.
Yeah.
I think he something happened where he like lost something that was important to him and somebody in the cafe is talking about like something that tragic that happened in their life and he goes, I lost something once. And people now like say that all the time. Like that's like such a huge joke. But there's like, but with SpongeBob, there's a million of those, and a
Yes,
lot
a
of those
million of them.
still come from the movie.
Yes.
And everybody knows what like a goofy goober is like,
Yes.
and it like once you say that, like it completely you're wrapped up in this like
World.
goofiness and
Yeah.
silliness that it created.
I guess I want to wrap up a little bit by talking about this returning to this point about animation and about like wonderful movies that are meant for all ages in general. I have been feeling pretty fucking grim lately. There's just a lot of like personal like ups and downs, and then there's also the world has just been a really horrible place just to listen in on. So I, in particular, have just felt real that the general atmosphere around recent events has been really toxic, you know? And so I am so grateful to these creators, like weird these weird combination of passions. When I read that Steven Hillenburg was passionate about marine biology and then became passionate about animation, I am so grateful that people are still that they created this stuff and that no matter how many times you've watched it, it's still wonderful. It makes you access that part of you that is all about laughter and joy and optimism and resilience. And
Yeah,
so watching SpongeBob, this rewatching the movie this past week and then watching Iron Giant today, really was like very soul refreshing for
yeah,
me. And I will stand up and defend those movies till with my last breath as standing up against any of the like big important Oscar winners because I think that movies that can withstand, you know, how grim and like make you feel, you know, like a kid again and just make you feel about all the better that there are still like really good people and creative people who are creating wonderful things in the world. I am so grateful. So
yeah,
I'm very sad that Steven Hillenburg is no longer with us. He was very private apparently. So he's not there's not like there wasn't a ton none of no he didn't do a lot of promo. He wasn't a visible creator. And it was also in the era before social media, you know, really took over too. But
yeah,
I don't think he would have been big on social media if he was still alive. But I'm so grateful to him. So grateful to Brad Bird. So grateful to all the like wonderful people who let me access joy and laughter again.
yeah,
And even just talking about the jokes with you from the movie, just the hilarious
yeah.
parts.
There are too many funny parts.
It's
Too many
just wonderful.
moments that
Yeah.
like we just get to cherish now,
Yeah.
from having experienced them.
Yeah.
Um, and
I
I
feel that
don't,
way about K-pop too.
yeah, yeah, somewhat. And I don't want to get too depressing or like emotional. But I feel like it's worth pointing out, like just because this has to do with SpongeBob. And it was something I saw recently. But there was a story, one of the CBS reporters did about seeing rooms of the kids that have been killed in school shootings. Where he took photos, or he had a photographer come and take photos of these untouched rooms because obviously parents like wanted to keep their rooms the same. It's obviously so tragic and so sad. But you get to look into these kids and their lives. And one of the kids had a room that was all SpongeBob. Like every corner of his room was SpongeBob. He had like he must have been 20 like stuffed animal SpongeBob on his bed, SpongeBob sheets, SpongeBob like toys everywhere. Um, and it was untouched. Like his parents like left it exactly the same. And it was so heart-wrenching to see that. But really beautiful that it's still a show. Like I mean, I think he was a kid that was it was a more recent, kid that was lost. So SpongeBob came out years and years ago. It was like when I was born,
And it's still
and it's
hitting.
still something. I mean, it's still going, and obviously kids I think are still watching. But it's still something that means so much
Yeah.
to everybody.
Yeah, it's like
Uh,
how Avatar will forever mean
yeah,
what it does to you, you
yeah,
know? So I guess my last thought on this, if anyone's listening, is that if it's not animation that brings you joy, if you really can't bring yourself to watch a movie that or a show that sounds really noisy or it doesn't sound like sounds like it's not for you, just like a lot of people thought K-pop Demon Hunters is not for you. I really hope that you have the equivalent of that. Like I hope that you have something that gives you as much joy as watching movies gives us joy or animation, like our some of our favorite films are animated.
My favorite films are animated, all
Yeah.
of them,
Well,
and my
not,
shows.
yeah, I have a lot of movies that are not animated that are my favorite movies too, but I have to say, and I also can appreciate like a lot of different types of movies.
Yeah,
But I will just say that when it comes to just remembering that there's laughter, remembering that there's joy, and remembering that there's people who pursue their oddest passions and then create
yeah.
something, that is incredible.
Hmm.
I was reading the backstory about what inspired the Iron Giant, and there were so many intriguing parts to that backstory. And I was, and learning about Stephen Hillenburg was so rewarding and satisfying. So I really hope that there's just not too many people who are getting too discouraged or disheartened. This is a world where they keep on trying to tell you that being odd or different is bad, and that's so the opposite. Like having odd, quirky passions, being different from everyone else, this is what results in great art being made. So I think SpongeBob movie is worth watching, but if it's not for you, find something that is.
I will put my foot down and say that if there's people that haven't seen a single minute of SpongeBob, that the movie would be a great way to experience it.
Yeah.
It was obviously meant as a finale, and it should, and it would have been, I think, poetic if it was. Um, but the fact that it is still going is still a testament to its legacy. I do think it's really shitty that like the wishes and spirit of Steven Hillenberg are obviously being ignored by the studios. Like, of course they're gonna do that. Like, they announced that they were gonna make Krabby Patty and release it, which is something that Steven Hillenberg explicitly said, don't do that because that's fucked up. Like, you never sell the Krabby Patty. That's you're literally being Mr. Krabs. Um, but like, but obviously they're gonna do that, and people were really mad about that because they know Steven Hillenburg hated that
Yeah,
idea.
yeah, yeah.
But no matter how many reboots or uh, or disparages of this medium and this piece of work that Steven Hillenburg created, no matter how much it's like disparaged, it'll always forever be something that's at its core something important to
Yeah.
society and art.
Yeah.
And I
So,
hope it remains that way for forever.
very random parting thoughts. I do remember while watching the show that I thought it was Mr. Krabs' daughter, Pearl,
Yeah.
is a whale.
Yeah.
So he's a crab,
Yeah.
she's a whale.
Hmm. That's true.
And the other thing that occurred to me while I was watching the movie is that the Krabby Patty must not be made out of crab, right? Because, right?
It's a Krabby's Patty. It's not a Krabby
Krabby
Patty.
Patty, that's
Yeah.
right. I just think I think it's part of the joke that you would question that and then come to the conclusion that it must not be made out of crab.
Yeah.
And
But
then
I don't know.
I literally had this thought
Why are
like
there no other crabs?
I just
Right?
I just had this thought that maybe I just had this thought like, is it made out of some plant-based matter? That was, and then the last thing is that one of the funniest things I've always found about Bikini Bottom is that the toilet's flushed.
Yeah, yeah.
Any parting thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, again, nothing is too outside of the box for SpongeBob. Like, especially with the movie, because they knew the movie they had to step it up. They had
Right.
to
They
deliver,
did step it up.
and they did. With David Hasselhoff, um, with the rock song, the Goofy Goober rock song at the end,
Yes.
where they casually, like, even for the man, the Now That We're Men like song, um, they just it doesn't exactly come across as like a musical number as much as like a kind of little montage of like
Yeah.
fun and excitement, which is what the last one is. And like you see Patrick in like fishnet, like what do you call it, stilettos,
That's right. He was in
like, yeah,
stilettos.
and he's like dancing, and then when they're done with the performance, SpongeBob is hanging in the air like on
Yes.
the ropes, and then Patrick is in still in his stilettos. It's like, I'll get it,
That
it's all
was a
working the
very
same
funny
way.
way.
And as an overall last point, like, the voice acting,
It's so great.
it should be like an Oscar. It should be an Emmy. It should be an award, to give voice actors more of a platform to be able to do great work. There actually are a lot of shows where the voice acting is subpar or like not it's just not the best.
Yeah,
Or it tonally doesn't work. But nobody can question the talent of the actors themselves. And all the voices of SpongeBob
are so
are
good.
so good and so heightened. Even characters who were sidelined. Honestly, Squidward was sidelined for this movie.
Yeah.
He was not the biggest part of the movie, but he had his one scene where he like gave it to Plankton and was like, "You can't. I have rights, and you can't, do this to us. Like, you can't just steal the Krabby Patty." But the voices just bring so much energy and life, especially Tom Kenny, who's not only a legend because of SpongeBob, but he's done Ice King and Adventure Time, and he's done loads of other voices that are super recognizable. Um, there's so much work and passion from all these creators, not
Yes.
just
Agreed.
not just Steven Hillenberg, who made the show and obviously created it in a way that was genius and brilliant, but like incorporated all these other people who were just as passionate as he was about his crazy world that doesn't make sense,
Yeah,
in
yeah, yeah,
Bikini
yeah.
Bottom. So
Yes, yeah.
yeah,
Anyway, I am very glad that we got to record this episode. I'm glad for the suggestion. Say thank you to Carrie for me.
I will.
And then also, so glad that we got to watch movies together and do the free film festival. And I hope we have many more film festivals in our future, actually.
Yeah.
That was a blast.
Hmm.
So it was just a blast getting to see
We
movies
should go to
that,
Sundance at some point
yeah,
in the
maybe.
future.
Yeah, but then then you would see all those indie movies that are all dark and like weird.
Whatever. I mean,
There's so much
and be in the
darkness.
culture.
I guess so. There's so much darkness.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I've been following the news from Venice and TIFF pretty closely, and we saw a lot of previews also when we were watching Barry Lyndon yesterday of from the TIFF premiere, and there's a lot of dark shit coming
Yeah.
out. It's award season, so it's like dark. Let's look at our worst psychoses and fears and repressions, and yay, okay, SpongeBob is the antidote to that.
It is.
All right. Anyway, I love you very much, Eric.
Love you
This
too.
was a fun weekend.
Yeah.
And we'll see you next time. And we'll see you now on TikTok because Eric's been putting up our old
See you,
clips.
goofy goopers, later
See you, Goofy
on
Goober.
TikTok. Follow us on TikTok
Yeah, follow us on
at
TikTok.
Mom
Mom
and
and Eric.
Eric.
The
Mom.
Mom and Eric show or the Mom and
No,
Eric?
at Mom and Eric. Mom letter N Eric.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.